decided to have lunch with everybody, and I had Robert, Heather, people I hadn't seen in years. And everybody talked about how the film had changed their life. Heather had, for instance, been stalked.
Leave us alone, you son of a bitch!
And I was telling him like how it was just making me crazy and I was scared all the time.
He started again. And he's putting stuff in my mail again.
And so then like 2 weeks later on my doorstep is this script that's like everything that I had told him in the context of Freddy Krueger.
Miss me.
It was a serious movie. Freddy had a new look, touched on a lot of the cool scenes from the original movie.
Look at number 1, and then you look at number 7, and then you get a sense of what Wes Craven wanted to do.
Nightmare really changed everything for New Line.
Up to number 4, 3 and 4 were both well done, delivered the goods, and very much an important aspect of the company.
The fact that you're successful exploiting and promoting and marketing a property lets other suppliers know that you could be a destination point.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
We used the success of Nightmare on Elm Street as a calling card to investment bankers to have our own initial public offering. With the additional financing that we had, we were able to increase our bank line and do a lot of other things so that we weren't only beholden to a Nightmare on Elm Street.
What?
Bob was able to put together a deal with RCA Columbia Home Video, and they did an output deal with us for 10 pictures, and the first 2 were going to be Critters.
Critters, New Line's answer to the Gremlins. Critters were these little puppets from outer space that basically they're here to eat you.
They actually look like porcupines, and they shoot these killer spikes out at you.
It spawned a theatrical sequel, Critters 2, and then 2 more direct-to-videos. And we are looking to resurrect the Critters brand. The Mangler, the killer washing machine. Really gruesome. Not that they showed you so much, but it was definitely a gut test. So of course, I'm like, oh, I think this movie's making me sick. We have to buy it. Man's Best Friend. That was the dog who had gotten injured, and they put all these parts in. It was like Terminator dog.
The Hidden was a really intelligent sci-fi movie. The story was good, the action was great.
Hidden alien-type creature.
Are we talking spacemen here?
Where it would look for its host and would turn into that host. It really wasn't just a shock movie. It was like a thinking person's horror sci-fi movie.
The Blade films were a lot of fun. There was a combination of kind of a martial arts vampire thing that I hadn't seen before.
Hip, edgy, based on a comic book.
The great thing about that franchise is they really stayed true to the vision of the filmmakers on that. It was a dark vampire movie. It had an African-American lead. New Line took a chance on a concept that was before its time, and now everybody's doing urban horror films.
I especially liked 7, and it kind of took thrillers into horror. I thought it crossed the genre.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a homicide.
7 is a kind of strange subgenre of crime films where you have spectacular crimes committed with a theme.
Honestly, have you ever seen anything like this?
Aside from the whole movie being dark, the ending's really grim and depressing, and I know that a lot of studios wanted to cut that, and New Line took a chance on that movie and made something really special.
That was a movie that showed that New Line could attract the A-level talent, the A-level directors. That just showed that New Line was a force to be reckoned with, not just the studio that can carve out the niches.
I think that in some cases the studios look at horror films from a bit of a distance, as if it's the ugly stepchild of film genres, when in fact, if you're in a theater, that's where you'll hear the greatest reactions.
There's always room for a good horror film. People love a good scare. There would not be 7 different Freddy movies if there wasn't an audience for it.
Horror films did not always have a franchise. Now it's almost a given that you're going to have a franchise.
The Friday the 13th franchise was at Paramount for many, many years, and it features the exploits of Jason Voorhees.
He's the one that came back for years and was hacking his way through Camp Crystal Lake and killing numerous teenagers.
The Friday the 13th movies are strictly, it's just one formula. If you have an orgasm, you're going to have a spear put through you, literally.
We looked at that character and saw that there was still a life in what was considered by our competition that it had run its course.
And Sean Cunningham, who's the producer of those films, had the thought that maybe we should make more and maybe New Line's the right place to do it.
I went to Mike Lynn and Bob Shea, who I knew, who were running New Line. What if we took Freddy and Jason and put them in the same movie? They thought it was a great idea if I could just get the rights. And I was able to get the rights from Paramount and Warner Brothers and be able to bring them to New Line. So then we got to make Friday 9.
We resurrected him. Jason goes to hell. Jason's out chasing after the young teenagers at a camp. Jason does go to hell at the end of the movie. Up comes Freddy's glove.
Which was in anticipation of what we hoped was going to be the Freddy-Jason heavyweight prize fight. And we were not able to convince people at New Line that we had broken the back of the script. Once again, I'm saying, well, we're going to have to keep it alive somehow. What if we did Jason in space?
Critters went to outer space. Hellraiser went to outer space. Now Jason goes to outer space.
Everybody would say, Freddy versus Jason, that's great, I want to see it. But then you read a script and you say, that's not very good.
The rules are inherently incompatible. Freddy is the dream world, and how does he access people? Do they need to be asleep? Is he asleep? So how do you get Jason into dream world or Freddy into the real world?
New Line really wanted to find the right story because you don't want to jump the shark on this movie because you could destroy both franchises.
We developed Freddy vs. Jason for 10 years before we finally got a script that we liked enough to make, and when we made it, it actually was a great success.
People were just so curious to see these two pop icons trying to duke it out in some sort of a world heavyweight horror match.
It was worth waiting for because, Ronnie, you got it right.
For the film to do over $80 million in the box office was just fantastic. I think it really surprised everybody. Also goes to show you that the horror fan base is very loyal, and they love both of these characters.
Like Friday the 13th, Leatherface is under the umbrella now of New Line Cinema, which is a good thing.
It is interesting that New Line now has the rights to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street because you have Freddy, Jason, and Leatherface all in the same place.
You're looking at the same thinking that went on 40 years ago at Universal. Universal Pictures had the rights to Dracula, the Frankenstein monster, the Wolfman, and the Mummy.
And as they start running their course, then all of a sudden it's Frankenstein versus the Mummy and the Wolfman. And eventually it was Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
For New Line to get Jason, Freddy, and Leatherface by rounding up these three mythic killers under one banner, you have a franchise. Not one franchise, but three.
Part of it is that Bob Shea really digs horror movies. It is the foundation on which the company was built.
You don't want to miss the bus.
We have a horror idea. Our head of production, to his credit, will go, talk to Bob.
There are certain reliable genres in movie entertainment that have been pretty solid citizens and reliable in terms of creating a profit for the investment. Think back, there will be a lot of films that have been low-budget horror movies.
Final Destination really was started out and from the meetings back in the day of let's make a really cool horror movie and make one good one.
You can just drop fucking dead.
I was sitting on a plane one time and I read this article about this woman who was going to take a flight, and her mother called her the night before she was going to get on the plane and said, don't take that flight, I have a bad feeling about it. And the woman didn't take the flight and the plane went down. You know, what if she was meant to die on that flight? And what if death came after her? And then I was like, holy crap, we've never seen death in a movie.
What if we were not meant to get off that plane? What if it still is our time?
The first Final Destination was actually a sleeper hit of the year. It was one of New Line's biggest hits that year. Death is always around us. I think it's a movie that could continue going on as long as there are new and interesting stories to tell.
Anytime you can create a franchise that people are familiar with or excited by, it's a huge plus.
The key thing is just to look for good stuff. And then the franchise will find you. I mean, Lord of the Rings is the classic example. No one here thought that was going to be a $3 billion kind of home run. Everyone sort of thought this will be good, but no one thought it would turn into the phenomenon it did.
New Line Cinema is a studio that takes chances, and these chances, more often than not pay off. And when they do pay off, you get really good films.
One of the great beauties of New Line is to pick stories that have, at their core, something that appeals to an avid, motivated audience of filmgoers.
Leatherface, Freddy, Jason, Pinhead, Michael Myers. Not our characters, yet the future's pretty exciting.
I don't know if we'd see a Freddy versus Leatherface versus Jason versus Death. It's really hard to predict where horror is going to be in the future, but I'm sure New Line will actually be there making the good stuff.